Hello class, how are you? You are welcome to week 3 THA 417 online lectures. In this week 3, we are looking at classical Greek theater. Classical Greek theater. What is classical Greek theater? Classical Greek and Roman theater are the oldest documented theater, dated around 5th century. Classical Greek theater emerges from a festival to Dionysia, a Greek god. The festival is known as City or Great Dionysia, a festival in honor of Dionysus, the god of wine and reproductive forces in life. It is a form of religious feast and festival that celebrates the beliefs and aspirations of classical Greeks. A typical Greek theater is an arena theater, that is an open-air theater, consisting of themeli, that is an altar of Dionysus, skin, that is dressing rooms for actors, paradox, that is entrance and exit point for chorus, and mechanical devices like the machine and ekiklema. Now, classical Greek society and their prevalent ideas. Remember that I told you that the theater of any society cannot be separated from their way of life. Theater is the way of life of the people. And so to know more about the theater of any period, you have to know the way of life of the people, especially their prevalent ideals. Ideals are ideas that shape our actions. And classical Greece is a feudal society, F-E-U-D-A-L, feudal society. And so it has a triangular political structure. The gods are taken to be at the apex, at the top of the triangle, outside the triangle. Then the feudal lords are at the apex, inside the triangle, and the peasants rest at the broad bottom part of the triangle. Hence, if the society is threatened from the top, there will be no escape, as the whole society will be affected. That is, that arrangement is in consonance with their ideal. This structure symbolizes their great ideal of the supremacy and the absolutism of the Greek gods. The gods dictate the affairs of man, and man is totally at the mercy of the gods. Unlike traditional African gods, they can rarely be appeased to retract their pronouncement. Hence, there is the strong element of fate and predestination. Man is fated, and what he becomes is predestined by the gods, and there is no escape from oracular pronouncement of what a person will be. Classical Greek theater is renowned for its great learning and bravery, but both must be exercised within the context of what is human without daring the affairs of the gods. The gods are sacrosanct, their pronouncements are absolute. And so the virtue of moderation is therefore a cherished ideal in classical Greek society. There is this saying, man, know thyself, they would say. And that means know that you are a mortal. Man, you must know that you are a mortal. Excess of anything is believed to make a person guilty of pride and arrogance, hubris. And this hubris attracts the wrath, the anger of the gods. What is the content of classical Greek theater? Classical Greek theater is a reflection of the people's way of life. It focuses on the relationship between man and the gods. in terms of tragedy, in the case of tragedy. And it also focuses on the relationship of man and his fellow men. That is, when it comes to comedy, classical Greece is highly religious, and the content of theater is very ritualistic and celebratory, full of feasts and festivals. The story of tragedy is often taken from classical Greek myth or classical Greek mythology and legends, while that of comedy is taken from the foibles of lowly placed characters, the way of life of the lowly placed characters, the behavior, the weaknesses of the lowly placed characters. Form and conventions of classical Greek theater. Tragedy and comedy are the major dramatic forms of classical Greek theater. A tragic play does not contain anything comic, and a comic play does not contain anything tragic. Therefore, there is this rigid boundary between what is comic and what is tragic. Aristotle defines tragedy as an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude, in language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament, the several kinds being found in separate parts of the play, in the form of action, not of narrative, through pity and fear, effecting the proper purgation of these emotions. Unquote. This is Aristotelian definition of tragedy, the classical definition of tragedy, the classical concept of tragedy. For Aristotle, therefore, an action is serious, not when many people die or when a place is on fire. No. For Aristotle, an action is serious when it threatens the existence of whole people or when it threatens the existence of a whole race. A good example is Wole Soyinka's Death and the King's Horseman, the refusal of Eleshi Oba to transport the dead king to the world of the ancestors is a big threat to the continual existence of the African people who believe in reincarnation, because the king needs to join the ancestors so that he can reincarnate and be born among the living. In that cycle, existence continues in the African concept of the world existence. And so the refusal of Eleshi Oba to transport the spirit of the dead king to the world of an ancestors is a big threat. For Aristotle, this is an action that is serious because it threatens the existence of the whole black race. For Aristotle also, an action is complete. He said the action of tragedy must be complete. And for him, an action is complete when it is of a single action with one main plot, progressing through cause and effect relationship. It progresses from the beginning to the middle and to the end within one day. This is a complete action. And so in tragic plays, we have only one main plot with no subplot. This is very important, for in tragic action, there is an intensity of action. The action picks up from the rising position. It rises up through complication and crisis to the climax before it now begins to go down, what is called falling action. And so the structure of the action is also in form of tragedy, just like the political structure of the society. The action for Aristotle must have magnitude. And for him, what that means is that an action has magnitude when the tragic hero, that is the protagonist, is of a royal blood, and the language of the play spoken by the tragic hero is dignified or embellished. Now, if you remember their political arrangement, the gods live on top of everybody and outside the triangle, and from there he relates with man. The next to the gods are the feudal lords, those of royal family. They communicate with the gods. And so a tragic hero from Aristotelian theory, Aristotelian concept of the word tragedy, must be a man or a man from a noble family, a man from a royal family. And the action has magnitude when it is that kind of man. It's not just an ordinary man. It's not just an ordinary person. It's a person that stays closer to the gods, a person who can now communicate with the gods. And the communication with God is never in ordinary language, because the man in question is not an ordinary man. The person is communicating, the being he's communicating with is not an ordinary being. It's a supernatural being. And so the tragic hero has to speak in a dignified language. The dignified language in tragedy is the iambic pentameter, very musical, very poetic, and highly embellished. And when the action is like that, we say that the action has magnitude. The action has magnitude. Tragic action is to be acted. Yes, it's an action. Tragedy is an imitation of an action. When we say that the action of tragedy is acted and not narrated, it means that it is sung, mimed, with dialogue, with movement, with posture. It's not just a story told. It is an action on stage, and such action should evoke in the audience the emotions of pity and fear. The emotion of pity is evoked when the audience knows reason that the protagonist, that's the tragic hero, who is before them going through serious suffering, is a human being like them, is their king, and is good. It's not really very bad. And because of that, they have pity for him. The action also evokes fear. They are afraid when they see such a man, such a king. Is not what is suffering, is not entirely out of his own making. Is because the gods have predestined what he will be. And because the gods have predestined, any attempt to run away from it even brings the person nearer to the completion of the oracular pronouncement. And so what the tragic hero really suffers in classical tragedy is not entirely his fault. And so the audience become afraid. If this man who is a king, who is an extraordinary man, should suffer this in the hands of the gods, what will become of me, who is not even an extraordinary man, who is not even from royal family? And the audience must be cleansed of these emotions of pity and fear at the end of the play. This is very, very important. Aristotle never wanted us to leave the stage very down in sorrow or very much frightened. No. He insists that it is the duty of the playwright. It is the duty of the playwright to make sure that by the arrangement of the action, the audience must be cleansed of. They must be purified from these emotions of pity and fear. How does the playwright do that? The playwrights do that by, first of all, to cleanse the emotion of pity is when the protagonist, when the tragic hero begin to orchestrate hubris, that is pride, when he becomes proud, when he insists, like in the Agamemnon that we are going to read, the Agamemnon, began to walk on the red carpet. The red carpet is to be walked upon only by the gods. But because of his victory in war, when his wife, who really wanted to kill him, began to praise him, and at the height of the praise, rolled out a red carpet before him, his ego, his pride deceived him to walk on the red carpet. This is hubris. In classical Greece, once he sets his foot on the red carpet, the emotion of fear is cleansed from the audience, because all of them will dissociate themselves from his suffering. They will say, the man is too arrogant. What happened to him? He deserves it after all. And in that way, they will be purged of the emotion of fear. What about emotion of pity? They will no longer have pity for him. How is the audience cleansed of the emotional feeling of fear? The audience are also cleansed from fear once they begin to dissociate themselves from the protagonist, especially when the protagonist become very arrogant, become very proud. They will say, if I'm the one, I will not do that. How will I walk on a red carpet? And so it means that what happens to him is it will not happen to me, because I will not walk on a red carpet. In this way, the emotion of fear is also cleansed from the audience. Now, apart from tragedy, comedy also is a classical form. Classical comedy is defined by Aristotle as an imitation of action of lowly placed characters in a way that is not painful. This is very, very important. For the action of classical comedy is the follies or foibles or ridiculous tricks and weaknesses of lowly placed people like clowns, servants, messenger, drivers, and all that, cooks. These are lowly placed characters, and their little foibles, their little weaknesses, their little tricks are the subject of comedy. This is very important because in classical Greece, they believe that comedy should not cause any offense. Comedy should not make the people to think. Comedy should not make the people uncomfortable on stage. Comedy should not criticize. It should not satirize. And so to do that, they resort to the action, the foible, the pretense of lowly placed characters. Another important point in the concept of classical comedy is the fact that the subject should never be a form of deformity of the lowly placed characters. That is, if a lowly placed character is physically challenged or mentally challenged, a comedian must never use it as a subject of comedy. It will not allow the audience to laugh at them because of their deformity, because classical comedy evokes nothing but belly laughs, what we call belly laughs. It evokes nothing but buffoonery laughter, laughing for laughing's sake. It's not like the laughter we witness in our world today, where ugly incidents are performed in a way that forces laughter out of you. This one, you laugh, is a hilarious laughter. You laugh because your fancy is tickled. And then ludicrous costume, movement, physical comedy, posture, mistaken identity are the devices that classical comedy uses to evoke buffoonery laughter. Like the Menachemi play we're about to read for discourse is about just the laughter there is evoked through the intricacies of mistaken identity. And so nobody is being satirized, nobody is being criticized. It's just foible coincidences and all that, and just make people laugh. Comedy for the classical period is primarily for relaxation, to help people relax after the 3 heavy tragedies. Now, critical essays. The oldest critics of drama and theater are Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle. They wrote the first documented critical essays on art, and that includes drama and theater, referred to them as poesy. Their works, The Republic by Plato and Poetics by Aristotle, are the first works on the theory and criticism of drama and theater. Plato is the first to make critical statements about artists and their works. Plato is an idealist who believes in things as they should be, a perfectionist, According to him, all poets, all artists are liars, including theater artists. According to him, he said they are 3 times removed from the truth. That is, they are 3 times removed from the ideal. According to Plato, anything there is exists first and foremost in the realm of idea, in the form of idea. And the idea is the real object, and hence the ideal is the truth. For example, according to him, there is the idea of bed. This is the ideal bed, the true bed, created by God, the creator of all things. And then there is a concrete physical bed made or created from the true ideal bed. This is not the ideal bed, but a particular kind of bed made by a carpenter. Finally, according to him, there is a painted bed, an imitation, an illusion, a semblance of the concrete bed. And this kind of bed is made by artists who merely paint the bed. He calls him the imitator of things as they appear. And so they are not really imitating the real thing. The real thing is the ideal bed. They imitate the semblance of it created by the carpenter. Plato, therefore, concludes that theater artists and all artists, all poets, are liars who are 3 times removed from the truth and should be driven out of civilized society. Plato argues also that poets are not only liars, that artists are not only liars, but that they incite others by suggesting that the gods can lie, and by exposing in their works, in their plays, the ugly side of the society, the immoralities in the society. These are, according to Plato, the features of tragedy include mythical subject matter, tragic hero as protagonist, dignified language, single plot, iambic pentameter, triangular structure, discovery and reversal, falling from grace to grass, all men actors, no violence on stage, unity of action, and all that. These are all for you to study. On the other hand, we thank God for Aristotle, who was a student of Plato. He is a realist and believes in things as they are. He defends the artist by insisting not just on the value of their work alone, but also on the work itself and the skill of the artist in creating the work. According to Aristotle, the ugliness, that is the evils in the society that the poets expose, are not created by the poets, are not created by the theater artists, are not created by the artists, but they are already present in the society, killing and destroying the society underneath. And so the artists uncover them for the purpose of social and personal transformation and progress. And in this way, the artists help to limit the havoc they do underneath the society. Aristotle therefore insists that the artists are needed and are welcome to every civilized society. Thank you very much for listening. Study the 2 recommended plays, Agamemnon and Menachemi. These are 2 classical Greek plays. Read them, imagine the theater, and most importantly, discuss the features of classical tragedy and comedy in each of them as the case may be. Goodbye, and see you next time when we will handle with 4 the Renaissance and Elizabethan theater. Thank you.